All right. Hello and welcome to the Grace Hour Show, a Christian program that takes a dive into our daily challenges and helps us learn our faith in a practical way. My name is Liz Robbins, and I'm joined today by my husband and co-host, Roger Robbins. Hello. And we've got a really great week of shows for you this week. We are kicking off today talking about the fall of man. But just because that sounds a little bit somber on its own, we wanted to just give you a preview of what you have in store for this week. So, Raj, maybe you could just give them a preview of what's to come.
Yeah, well, this is pre-convention week, so we got a lot of guests and a homecoming of sorts, and we're rolling out the red carpet.
Yeah, here in Baltimore, we have
for
an
all the
exciting
missionaries.
week ahead.
Yeah, it's exciting week and one that we really anticipate and celebrate with great enthusiasm.
Yeah. Actually, if you're listening and you don't know what we're talking about, you can go to the website and check it out. But every year we have what we call an international convention here in Baltimore, Maryland. And it's free. All are welcome. And it's a whole week. We have guest pastors from all over the world, and they're featured. Our African pastors, our Indian pastors, European pastors, those from South America and throughout Asia, and also from our churches throughout America. So you're invited. If you're listening, you are invited. Please come. You're
Registration
welcome.
is free.
It's free. Yeah,
there
registration is free.
Did you hear that?
And it's next week, but again, just keep it in your mind. It could be something that you could consider coming and joining us here. We would love to meet you.
Yeah.
And really, it's an incredible week for many, life-changing, because you get to see what God is doing throughout our Greater Grace ministry throughout the world, and hear from people who maybe you would never hear from, get to, form friendships with people from all over the world. So anyways, we're big fans.
We could just talk about that for 45 minutes.
We could talk about convention.
About the pre-convention anticipation.
Yeah. And it's great for kids too. Our kids look forward to it because there's an incredible kids program too. So anyways,
sunrise to
go
sunset.
ahead and give them a preview of what this week's shows are going to be before we dive in.
So from the fallen to the redeemed is the overarching title. From the fallen to the redeemed. The story of the human race. The story of the human race. And man, that thing has been spinning around for a long time.
We're just going to spend a week on that.
We're going to kick it around, but thanks be to God. We have his word, we have his spirit, and we have what is his spirit revealing to us the things that he said that have happened, that are happening, and what will to come. And it as we ponder it, and Liz and I are just saying, we are humbly pondering it as we look at it from different angles. It is a mystery. Yeah. Just the first 3 to 4 chapters of Genesis. Yeah. I was coming home on a plane last night thinking about it, and I just was staring off into the sky, wow, Lord, where is this garden, and how come this and how come that? But I think there's common threads that we want to bring up when it comes to the fall and really the loss of unity. And that's what we titled this, right? We titled this The Fall.
Unity Lost.
Unity Lost.
Yes. And
really what we're speaking to and I think and wanted to bring up, because as we go through the week, tomorrow will be the post-fall world. And the reign of sin, so the effects of what we will speak of today, the fall, in present. And then Wednesday, the flood, judgment, and a new beginning. We see the shift, which is really promised in Genesis 3:15, with this prophecy that he will crush his head, the serpent's head. And then Thursday, redemption, the full...
That's a good day. That's going to be a good day.
Of everything that was and is to come, has and will be, how the Messiah and dealing directly head on, face to face with the problem of sin. And then finally Friday is the post-redemption or the post-redemptive story. How do we live now is really the idea, in the present. So, let's start and back up Genesis, and I want to read maybe one verse though in 1 Corinthians 15 to kind of frame this fall of man. And it is 1 Corinthians 15, and it says in verse 45, thus it is written, the first Adam became a living being. And that living being in the Greek is the word for soul, living soul. And then it says the last Adam became a life-giving spirit. There are two Adams that we see throughout Scripture. The first is the one we want to talk about today, but there is a second which will be talked about later this week.
Yes.
And do I want to talk about the second one?
I know.
Well, we're itching to talk about the second one. I was thinking the same thing. We have to hold the reins, and we got to talk about the real nasty truth of the matter.
Yeah. Well, this is why we essential. This is what we're going to hopefully enjoy doing today, even though it is in some ways the darkest part of our history, you could say.
It's the opening up of the closet.
The fall of man, but also it is important for us to really sit with it, grasp it, believe it, internalize it, I think, personalize it, because this is why we have a need for Christ.
Yes.
And so those coming later on the week, we'll get to enjoy introducing that, but there is so much value in understanding what happened in these chapters.
Right, because Jesus said, those who don't need a physician are they're not going to come.
You don't know you're sick.
You don't know you're sick. You don't know you need a problem.
Right.
But when we boil it all down and we look at the world around us, everyone has this same problem. We know in Romans chapter 3 that all have sinned and fallen short in verse 9 and 10. Yeah. And it describes this fall in great detail, pinpoint exact detail.
So,
now, in Genesis chapter 1, and then in chapter 2, we see an amazing story of creation that is just, it is the greatest, presentation of a visual read I think there is in the world today. There is not another book in which you can read 1 page or 2 page and spend your entire life. We can spend our entire life pondering how things were formed.
And did we already give that disclaimer? I feel like we should give it again.
What's that?
Just that these chapters are so profoundly rich and also foundational and theologically fraught with meaning and mystery.
Yes.
And many a theologian have wrestled and argued and pondered these chapters, and we are the least of these.
Yes.
So we just want to put that there for you.
All we want to do is say there was 7 days of creation, right?
Yeah, and we just want to, in a sense, even talking about the fall, that we want to reconsider with you these ancient truths, but also, like you said, recognizing the mystery of these words and these chapters, and that we just want to enjoy how this leads to the gospel.
Right, and also encourage you to enjoy it too, because we know that the story's not over. You keep reading past Genesis chapter 2, and you keep going, and you keep digging and pondering, and God will show you through imagination, through those who seek Him. Right? It says in Proverbs, I think it's 10, Proverbs 8. It says, I love those that love me, and those that diligently seek me will find me. I love those that love me, and those that seek me diligently will find me. I think it's 8:17 Proverbs. So that's what we're doing today.
Yeah.
Okay. The 6th day is the day we're going to focus in on. And that's a special day because it's the day that God gave living creatures a place on the earth. And from the heavens, he creates everything in the sea and on the land, and everything that has a wing and everything that's in water. And then he blessed it. He said, be fruitful and multiply in verse 22, right? And that was the 5th day. And then comes the 6th day. Sorry, I confused myself there. Then comes the 6th day, and God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures. And he does it with every kind. And then it says here in verse 25, and God made the beasts of the earth according to their kind, and livestock according to their kinds, and every creeping thing. And God saw that it was good. And then this incredible, breathtaking statement, he says, let us make man. Let us make man. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over the livestock and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. And so God made man in his image, and in the image of God he created him, male and female he created them.
Wow.
And God blessed it.
Yeah.
So this
is the start of man.
We see this start as just so exciting. And really, we always take note in the fact that we are made in the image of God. There are not enough people out there saying this truth.
Yes.
This is a truth that is shrouded in this fall that we are talking about today.
Yeah.
It is shrouded in the sin and pride and ego of man, which is from the result of the fall. And it is shrouded in the world today through the endeavors of man's own ingenuity to produce some other godlike creature within himself and with the things that are made and fashioned with his own hands.
Yeah.
And so
Which really you just summarized we're going to spend more time on it, but that's a great summary of the effects of the fall of man. It's all of those things. And I think it is important to look at the original design of male and female, that we are created in his image. We talk about this a lot because so well put that it's shrouded. It's so it's twisted in the world today. It's there's so much deception, which is why so many people are trying to prove their value, prove their worth, when actually we have been endowed with
great purpose,
unbelievable purpose and dignity and identity from our Creator. And it's been lost. So
I want to give 7 facts about Adam, just real quick, just to highlight who he is.
Okay.
This is from Wilmington Guide of the Bible.
By the way, just as a woman, when it says God created man in his own image, the word for man is for mankind.
Yes.
So that is man and woman are both created in the image of God. So, okay, go ahead.
Get your Hebrew right.
Sorry.
Got your Hebrew straightened out there. 7 facts about Adam. The highlight of God's creation. He is the highlight. He is the creme of the creme. He is like the crown jewel.
Yeah.
He is like, wow.
Male and female.
Yes, male and female. And you're going to do that again.
Okay.
It's so good.
They are the crowning jewel.
The highlights of God's creation, male and female.
I'm just going to keep saying it.
Okay.
Every time you say,
absolutely unique, male and female. No, come on. Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, but it's
made
beautiful.
in God's image. Made male and female, right? Okay. Declared king over creation. Commanded not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Okay. These are definitely good facts that we should know, and encouraged to eat of all other trees, and then given a wife. These are 7 facts about Adam.
Yeah.
Now, of these beautiful truths, man still, like, most of them, the highlight that he's at the top of God's creational list. He's absolutely unique, made in the image of God, declared king over creation, and then the 6th and 7th, or the 6th and 7th one, they're still around today. They're not missing.
Right, right. These are still true today.
They are still true today. And I think that's going to give you encouragement and give us thought as to what has happened because of this fall.
Yeah.
So with this in mind, what are we like? I was thinking, let's examine a couple things before we go any further.
Yeah, like one of the things I think that's worth pointing out here is that when God placed Adam and Eve in the garden, what he desired for them, what you listed here is what he desired for them, that they would be fruitful and multiply, that they would have dominion over creation, that they would be united, that they would have, relationship with him and with each other. And this is an important and just beautiful design that we get to know as believers, whereas the world is very confused about what our design is. But God in his wisdom created us so that we would have this unity in plurality. This is the phrase I wanted to bring up that I got to chat with my dad about this topic yesterday, and glean some wisdom from him. And we know that the Trinity is also described as having unity and plurality. And so God's design, like it's reflected again, like the way that we are image bearers, that we are a reflection of that. We are meant to be in community with each other in unity.
Yes.
That you, man and wife, and then between God, that there would be unity. And that's why as we continue into looking into the fall of man, what we see is this loss of unity.
Yes.
This tragedy that is a break in community, in relationship, not only between the husband and the wife, between Adam and Eve, but also them and God.
Exactly. And remember, like, let's highlight the blessing of this unity. Like, it was so profound.
It was fruitful in
that
every
God
way.
on the seventh day has to rest and just admire it.
Yeah.
He's like, this is incredible unity.
Yeah.
Seamless in its design, seamless in its intent and its purpose.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and in a way, I think it's good for us to do that. Like, don't let the fall take away what God did then.
Yeah.
It's still beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yes, tainted, but we know as the week progresses, as we read our Bible, as we know, that's not the end of the story.
Yeah.
So it is good, though, to just admire God's work, because on the seventh day, he brings rest. Nothing happens.
Yeah.
And he sits back, and just like we do in our own lives, we admire what it is that we do. And that's like the picture of which we can understand the purpose of unity, right? Like the Creator creates a creature, and that creature is really made to reflect its Creator's design and purpose, its intent, its love. And what better thing for the creature to do to stop and do as the Creator did and admire, like, wow, Psalm 103, Psalm 139, like, I am fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yeah.
Like, in and through me in every part. So as we consider that, we do have to understand and consider the next chapter.
Yeah.
Which is, and I want to preface this with where we would say we don't know exactly when the devil fell, like in this picture, whether it was pre-creation, mid-creation, or like right after creation. Like, there's many theories to that and many like different thoughts to that we don't have time to get into.
Yeah, we got to.
However, we know that the devil shows up in chapter 3.
Yeah.
Now, prior to that, chapter 2, we see that there's one thing that the Lord asked God not to eat of, and that
he
was
asked Adam not to eat of. Yeah.
asked Adam not to eat of, and that tree we know is what really creates this whole fall principle. Like it is this the disobedience and turning away from God's design and unity.
Yeah.
Is what we receive and become in ourselves, or Adam and his nature corrupted. So I was just thinking, like, one little word that I just want to focus in on chapter 3, verse 1. It says, the serpent was more crafty than all the other beasts of the field that the Lord had made. And I think it's good to consider when we think about the fall, that we should think about the fall of the devil.
Yeah.
Right? So the fall of the devil is just like fascinating, and it's so important that we should really read and study Isaiah chapter 14 and Ezekiel chapter 28, because we see the fall of the devil there described, the cherubim of the Lord cast out. And I think it's also important to understand that the devil is the first one to get kicked out. Okay? Like, this fall isn't the first fall in every regard to this topic. You know what I mean? So it's important to understand the fall that happened before the fall of us. And that can, I think, really bring truth and light into this subject. Because why is the devil so crafty? You know, it's because he fell. And he wants the same thing to happen to you and I.
Yeah.
And he did in the garden. But I think that's so important that we point that out.
Yeah.
And that word crafty means like extremely ingenious as it regards to unity. he wants to distort that unity. Like he twists the words of God in this chapter.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think it's amazing to think about the fact that he understood the makeup of Adam and Eve very well.
Mm-hmm.
So he understood what makes them tick. And you see in Genesis 3 when he is speaking to Eve and he's saying, "You will not surely die." And he's using God's words against him. He's twisting God's words, and he's presenting her with something she's never considered before about God. Mm-hmm. And he also knows that within her are these natural appetites. Like she has the way that she's been designed for food, for beauty,
Yes.
and for knowledge.
Yes.
And you see in verse 6, it says, "So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was a delight to the eyes, it's good to look upon, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise." Mm-hmm. That's when she took of the fruit and ate, and gave some to her husband as well, and he ate. And their eyes were both opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths.
Yes.
And this is like, it's just incredible, like you said, how crafty the devil was. And we see her natural appetites used against her to tempt her.
Yes.
By this tree.
Right. And because the devil wanted to be like God, right? Those are the 5 I wills or I ams, the 5 I wills of Isaiah chapter 14, okay?
Yep.
Now, look at that verse 5. It says, as he says right before the verse you described, you will be like God. You will be like God. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the very premise of the pride of the devil and his craftiness to plant that seed into the free will of Adam and Eve. Like to present that in the midst of the unity that they had. Yeah. You know, they were there walking in the garden.
And what an important point to make about that there was free will here. Like God let them choose this. Of course, knowing that they would and having a plan, but it's important to recognize, again, the dignity in that.
Yes.
Like there is great dignity and respect for the free will of men and women in this story. And it's worth pointing out as, I mean, it's a sad story. It is like a dark tale for us in the history of humankind. But in it, there's still beauty because God gives such dignity to man.
He does. And that is the beautiful part of this fall, which is different than the fall of the devil. Because we know that the devil does not have that same free volition, that he was a created being that was given certain privileges according to his design. And when he went against it, remember how he was kicked out of heaven. And if you read Ezekiel 28, the way the Lord kicks him out and shuts the door upon his decision of breaking from unity is completely different than how he treats man. Mm-hmm. He says, I will destroy you forever in Ezekiel 28. I will bring you to an ash heap. He said, and then he says that you will be cast out forever. Like those words, and it's very clear there that there is no open door for him. That what he did crossed the line according to his design and according to who he was as a created being. And I think that's very important because when we continue in this, we see something different here in the free will design of man and the dignity that he had in this being in the image of God and set apart and set differently than all the other creatures of the garden. So I think it's worth pondering that the devil's craftiness, knowing that the door's shut on him, right? He knows that he has a short time in Revelation chapter 12. Yeah. He's come down with great wrath because he knows he has a short time. And that craftiness is still being used to this day. Yeah. But I think it's worth pondering that.
We got to keep moving.
So the fivefold judgment upon sin, I want to mention that real quick. So in Genesis chapter 3, the fivefold judgment there's 4 different people, actually 5, but 2 of them are kind of lumped together. One is upon man, the first one's upon man, and it's wearisome toil. So when Adam and Eve broke this unity, they took on a judgment that is the production of the result of sin. And for man, it was wearisome toil. Secondly, upon a woman, it was that she would suffer in childbirth and be subordinate to a man. To nature, it's clear that the ground was cursed, and it says thorn and thistles and aimlessness would be the general product of nature, and it's working. And then upon the serpent, it says that he would crawl on his belly, and upon Satan, it says that he would suffer a final blow. So a final blow to the head, and that's in Genesis 3:15.
Right, which is a prophecy of what was to come through Mary.
So this fall for us is like so eye-opening, and I think very much like the start of our foundation as we think about the healing process or the recovery process.
Yeah.
So maybe we talk a little bit about that, like.
Well, I wanted to talk about some of, like you mentioned, the product or the fruit of these choices that Adam and Eve made, because right away we see, the next chapter is about Cain and Abel. So right away we start to see the fruit of it, and I think it's important to think about that when God created male and female, He created them with needs, basic needs. And we often talk about this, which is to love and to be loved. Or another way to put that is to have significance and to have security, to be secure. So when we are loved by somebody, we feel secure, and to love somebody is our ultimate purpose, to love. Yes. And so that gives us our significance. So that's like part of our design. That's in us from the beginning, before the fall. And that's why community and that unity we have between one another and then also with Christ or with God is so beautiful, because it's those needs are being met perfectly.
Through that,
to be loved and to love it creates a wholeness, like a health, just like it's such a beautiful picture of our design.
Yes.
And then when you see the fall, they make this choice to disobey God, which also I remember first thinking about that when we talk about the fall of man. We always think, okay, sin, and it's like so intense. We think about all the sins of the world. There's murder, adultery, horrible things. But the first sin was disobedience. That's what it was. It wasn't some grotesque, twisted thing. But all of those grotesque, twisted things come from disobedience to God's word.
Yes.
Like that is what happened. It wasn't some horrific thing. It's like, oh, what's the big deal? The big deal was that God created a perfect place for them to live and to grow and be fruitful and have community and relationship. And they chose something else. They chose disobedience. And everything now, all the way to today and in my being and in your being, stems from this disobedience. Yeah. And it comes from a broken, we're now at enmity with God, it says, that we are His enemies. And it's because we chose to try to find our significance and our security elsewhere. Yes. And not in His provision, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, you think about, I want to be like God. When really like the thought comes into our minds, and it does, like the temptation that Adam and Eve encountered is something to consider, right? As it brought them from a place of obedience, like you said, to a place of disobedience. Like it's definitely something that we should all ponder in this falling, the falling of mankind. Yeah. And I think that when you look at that falling, I think it awakens us to the reality of the craftiness of the devil, the beauty and the frailty of our volition. Like we really can choose
the power in it,
and then but it's very it's very upon us. Yeah, it's very much in our hands, and that really when we consider that, we can actually gather the strength as we go forward. But we see here with Adam and Eve that wasn't the case. Yeah. Now, maybe we just quickly hit this, is that in this chapter, again, if you were to compare this to Isaiah 14 and Isaiah 28, it is a different story.
Yes.
Right? And I think there's so much narrative. The gospel narrative is in this amazing chapter, right? Through prophecy, through promise, through a plan.
Yeah.
All those things are right there, and it starts right away. And then also the dialogue of God, how he comes to the garden.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Senses the disunity. So maybe just to encourage you guys to read this chapter again and think about it as it relates, because this first Adam, like I talked about, remember, it is according to dust. Man was made of dust, and in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, at the end of the chapter or midway through the chapter, it talks about how man will return to the dust. Now, when the devil like understands that, and I was thinking that when we also understand that, like our frailty, or as it says in Psalm 103, that you know my frame and you know that I am but dust. Like that reality really brings us back to the unity.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, to humility, right? Which is what's needed.
Yeah. And so those were the words we wanted to touch on, right?
Yeah.
Like this whole obedience and disobedience is really like kind of like you could exchange those words for humility and pride.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Like maybe we take away
It's a
those
very
two
good parallel,
those
actually.
two words, and then let's insert humility for obedience,
Yeah.
and disobedience. We could just insert pride.
Yeah. Because really, when you think about the difference between obedience and disobedience, humility and pride, there's choice, right? Like we have a choice. It's not like you're born more humble than me. Like it's not a personality thing. We make a choice to humble ourselves before the Lord, or we make a choice to exalt ourselves over the Lord and choose pride. And it is. I was listening to C.S. Lewis talk about this. I don't think it was really him talking, although there is some recordings of him. But I think it's from Mere Christianity. But he talks about pride, and he really highlights the fact that the teaching about pride when it comes to morality is very distinctly Christian.
Yeah.
That it is a vice, like it is a sin. Pride is a sin. Most of the world does not like to talk about pride in that way, but it is really at the heart of the gospel is that we have the problem of pride because it is the fruit of the fall.
Yeah.
Or I mean, maybe it was the cause of the fall, right? To exalt my own choice, what I want, over what God's design is for me. But if you avoid that, then you avoid the gospel. Like to avoid the fact that, like you said, we have in us this pride. We were born in sin. We were born in pride. Then you don't have a basis for the gospel. You don't have a need for it at all. Like you said, to say that I am not sick, that I am well, is the ultimate pride.
Yes.
And it is to say that I am not in need of a physician.
Yes.
I am not in need of a savior. So it's like, this is foundational. Like you can't get to Thursday and Friday's episodes if you don't sit here for a minute and really humble yourself in the truth that I am seeped in pride. Like I am desperately wicked. I am desperately sick. And pride, I liked this. Got to give again shout out to my dad because he gave us his notes on this teaching from a Bible school class he did on practical ecclesiology. So Dad, thank you. But he was talking about how in the fruit of the fall, he gave 6 things. And one of them was the birth of the conscience, right? Knowledge of good and evil. This was the beginning of the conscience. And when we have conscience coupled with pride, we have this court that we like to hold in session at all times where we are either accusing or excusing.
Yes.
Myself, right? I could be condemning myself or excusing myself, or I could be condemning you or excusing you. And we have all of these courts walking around, millions of us, with our individual courts, and they are corrupted. So pride produces this corrupted justice.
Yes.
I have a sense of justice, and so do you, but each one of them is corrupted. It is self-seeking. It seeks self-preservation. We defend ourselves. And this, like, think about the root of the problem we see in humanity. Isn't it this? It is pride, really. Yeah. It's ultimately pride that leads to this corrupted justice. Mm-hmm. And we are walking around with our fingers pointed, sometimes at ourselves. We can condemn ourselves also. But actually, who holds the power of judgment and ultimately of forgiveness? It is not you, and it is not me.
Yeah. And as I think maybe just to answer this question in short is like, how do I understand this fall, but I cannot base it and judge it? I mean, I cannot perceive it based upon my courtroom. Mm-hmm. I have to humble myself. The individual has to humble themselves and go, it's in your court. It's not in my court. Because my court system, like I think your dad has once said, like, you had this whole idea about the kangaroo court. Like a kangaroo court is a court that has no true judge.
It's like you putting on that ridiculous judge wig and thinking you have some kind of power.
Bogus witnesses, a bogus testimony.
Yeah, the jury.
Jury is like totally like
biased,
completely twisted and paid off or whatever. The whole courtroom is a sham. Is a sham. Yeah. It's so that we have to acknowledge that our own courtroom, and it says this in Romans chapter 1, right? It says, it says for the invisible attributes, his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, and the things that have been made, so that they are without excuse. Yeah, and it says it.
Chapter 1 of Romans really paints a pretty good picture of the fallen man who ignores the wisdom of God, ignores the justice of God, creates their own systems.
That is the baseline, that no one is without excuse. There is no courtroom outside of God's courtroom where there is an excuse. Yeah. There is no excuse, meaning there is no courtroom outside of God's in which the world will see everything the way it will be seen. I mean, the way it is someday.
And really, right away in chapter 4 of Genesis, you see these courtrooms, right? Cain and Abel.
Yes.
Cain has, he's saying, wait a minute, no, that's not fair. Abel, what did he do? He just like let his animals roam around and eat. I toiled and grew things, and I put those on the altar to God, and you're saying it's not acceptable? I say it's acceptable. Yeah. In my court of law.
Right. Do you do
this
good
is acceptable,
to be angry?
You know, and God is saying, no, it's not. And I choose what's acceptable. And Cain said, no, I choose. Yeah. Like right away, like boom, you see this conflict. This is one generation after the Garden of Eden. You see a person saying, what I have done is good enough. What I produce is acceptable. And really what we see here is the beginning of religion, meaning when I say religion, I mean works.
Yeah, the birth of religion.
This is like the very start of what we see of humankind producing a system of works that will justify them before God.
And it's disobedience.
Yeah, and
trying to justify
it's a sham. Like it is not acceptable. It has no standing in the eternal court that only God can hold this court. He is the judge.
And so
it's pretty incredible how quickly that happens.
To this, because hold on to the promise of Genesis 3:15 that God's going to do it. From the offspring of her, he will bruise his head. Yeah. He will bruise your head, devil. Yep. Like he will bruise your head. All of these courtrooms that are now being born and given into this world today are going to be taken care of, or can be taken care of by the blood of Jesus, by the power of his resurrection, by the power of his cross. Like all those things are going to be dealt with, right?
They're going to be dealt with.
So it's
that is the good news.
Thinking about that order and thinking about the reinstatement of unity. Because remember, there's going to have to, there's a cost. And we see that in the end of chapter 3, that the Lord provides skins for this kangaroo court, for this conscience that, saw their nakedness. They saw their nakedness. They hid and hide in shame and guilt. And then I was just thinking, like, then the Lord asked them to leave the garden, right? Like maybe we should just touch on that for a second. Yeah. Like, again, to go back to the example of Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, the way the Lord kicked the devil out of heaven, it was a closed case. Doors were shut. It's over. He is condemned forever.
Yeah.
That is not the case for man. He is under this toil. He is under the sweat of his brow. He is under the curse of sin and the effects of this disobedience. However, it's not the end. He's allowed to leave the garden. He's allowed to go into the world. I think that's really profound.
He's allowed to live.
He's allowed to live. He's allowed to be with his wife, right? He's allowed to continue
be fruitful and multiply,
to have children and to work the field and to tend of God's creation.
Right. That design was not destroyed in the fall.
Yeah. So there's hope for humanity, and it has always been because of his unique design. Mm-hmm. So I think it's worth mentioning that, and that the Lord wanted them out of the garden, lest they eat of the tree of life and live forever.
Yeah.
Which would then compound the problem.
They would be like eternally condemned.
Exactly, which is really the place of what happened to the devil.
Yeah.
That's the place of the devil and his standing right now. Yeah. He's eternally condemned.
Yeah, because you were saying earlier that actually the Lord sending them out of the garden was a mercy.
Yes.
Because and it says that at the end of chapter 3, the Lord says we must send them out unless they eat of the tree of life and live forever. And if you're not understanding the picture there, you might be like, well, isn't living forever good? Like, why would he want us to eat of the tree of life? But it's because they had disobeyed. So now they were in a state of condemnation, of disobedience. And if they were to then live forever, what that would mean is like what you're saying about Satan, that they would be eternally condemned.
Yes.
And he did not want that for humankind. And so he guarded the tree of life and he sent them out.
Because he had a second Adam coming.
Yeah.
He had a plan. It was going to be through a woman. The same way the fall entered through a woman, the Lord would eventually bring through a woman the second Adam.
And man, do we see his grace here? Like he's slow to anger. He could have been like, if I tell my kid not to do something and then they just in my face just do it and do it, which we see that all the time. My immediate reaction is like instant hot anger and punishment, right? But God is so rich in mercy and slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love. And we see that as early as Genesis 3. It's incredible. You can't miss the character of God in these chapters.
And then he backs it up in chapter 4. Remember when Cain took his brother's life, the Lord put a mark on him. And it's just like the way he kicked Adam and Eve out of the garden. It was mercy that he put this mark on Cain.
Yeah.
Otherwise, someone would have taken his life in an instant.
Yeah.
Because of what he did to his brother.
Yeah.
But the Lord wanted to give Cain an opportunity, I really believe, to repent, to turn. That even in this mark, it was like, you can't touch this man. Yeah. The Lord's upon him. Yeah. He is condemned, he is wrong, and he is guilty. But that's not the end.
Yeah.
Let him live. Yeah. And really, in a way, we are under that same mark. Those who haven't found Christ, of course, before our
we
new birth.
We are born into that. We're born marked in a sense.
And that marking can easily be of a different sort of marking, right? Like we know. So that's a whole...
Well, and I think we got to wrap it up. But again, just because we know that there's great people coming to talk about the end of this story. We presented the beginning, but the picture here is that the effects of sin are so quickly felt, and that the longings, the inborn, innate, natural design that God gave us to love and to be loved, to be secure and to be significant, when we separated from God, when we became children of disobedience.
Yes.
When that happens, and we are born into that, every single one of us, the natural outworkings of that is sin over and over and over again. Yeah. Because we have these needs and we're born with them unmet. Rather than having pure unity and fellowship with my Creator, who meets the need to love me fully and to know me fully, and that I would love Him fully. Because I don't have those and they're unmet needs, those become sin. You have lust and longings that are unmet, and we see them in every color, shape, and size and variety. You couldn't even capture all the ways that we have found to sin against God. But all of it is rooted in this.
Yes.
This unmet needs that come from this breaking of unity, breaking of fellowship with the one who was meant to meet all of our needs.
Yes, and can and will.
And will.
And we know
Yes.
that you described death, nakedness, curse, sorrow, thorns, sweat, and a sword. Well, Jesus in the book of John, the book of Luke, and even in Isaiah, he meets death.
Yeah.
He answers the question. He meets nakedness. He meets the curse, sorrow, thorns, sweat, and the same sword.
Yeah, so there is good news. Very good news.
But it only comes through one person, and that is Jesus Christ. He is the second Adam. He came through Mary, through the seed of the Holy Spirit. It's incredible just to even ponder it. And I think it's worth pondering more
Yeah.
how he treated the devil, how he treated man, the promises, the provision, and the plan of God in chapter 3. And then just seeing, even in the life of Noah, they're going to touch on this.
Yeah, and I want to read one verse before we end,
There
too.
is a continuation. So
Yeah. So Romans 5, verse 17, it says, "For if because of one man's trespass, death reigned through that one man, much more will those who receive the abundance of grace and the free gift of righteousness reign in life through the one man, Jesus Christ." So that is the beautiful end to this story. But we hope we've done the beginning of it justice.
Touched it.
We got to wrap it up, but thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe and keep tuning in all week for more of this amazing story.
And the studio window here is open, so we want to encourage anyone to come and sit. You can watch.
Yeah, if you're in Baltimore, come in and
speak.
join us live in the studio.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day.